Welcome back to the Padernacht Podcast, Brick by Brick. Today, I am sitting down with Anthony Day, who is the president of Fordham Prep in the Bronx. I am a proud graduate of Fordham Prep, and the reason why I'm bringing Anthony here today is to talk about my faith, my education, and how that school has impacted me and how I think it can impact thousands of people moving forward. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. So, alumni relations. How do you stay in touch with the alumni? Like, what's the process?
Yeah, there's so many ways to do it, right? I mean, it's so much easier to stay in touch with alums today than it was, let's say, 10 years ago, 10, 20, 30 years ago, right? Social media helps. There's no doubt about it. So Instagram accounts, Twitter accounts, LinkedIn, things like that. We could push information out, invite people to get engaged that way. We've captured everybody's, as many as we can, email accounts. So we push out, and you get it. We push out these newsletters. We let you know what's going on at the school. So that's one way of sort of getting word out. But then we've got the responsibility of making sure that we reach out directly to people. So I travel all over the country, to see our alums, California, Chicago, Boston, Florida, Texas, wherever, Phoenix, wherever they may be, we'll go to them, right? And you bring Fordham Prep to them, and it's a pretty cool experience. I mean, I get to travel all over the country, which I really enjoy, but I get to go to the place that they call home now. Yep. And when you bring a little bit of the Bronx to Scottsdale or LA or San Francisco or Boston, I think it feels good for them. And so we have a responsibility, right, to go to where they are as well.
I had mentioned this on the phone with you that it's really refreshing to have the president of the prep, like, just kind of be able to just sit down and chat with that, and it's very relatable. Mm-hmm. Is that something that past presidents did as well, or is that something that you kind of brought on?
Well, I'll let others be the judge of that, rather than throwing any of my predecessors under the bus for their ways of leading. But I owe a lot to all of them, right? Yeah. I mean, they have laid a tremendous foundation at Fordham Prep that gave me a nice runway, to get started here. Look, I mean, I'm a teacher at heart, right? I started my career at Fordham Prep in 1992 as an English teacher, and I've never forgotten what it means to be a teacher. Right, and what that experience was like for me. The folks often talk about teachers transforming the lives of students and being so inspirational. Or I got to tell you, and I think that's true. I know that teachers are like that, but I would also say that the students that sit in front of us and sat in front of me as when I was a teacher, they transformed my life too. Right, I learned a ton. I learned how to laugh more, right? I learned I was humbled, certainly in the 90s at Fordham Prep by the students that I taught, and to cut my teeth there was really meaningful, right? And so I really, to me, I always think as a teacher, and to be a teacher means to do your best to try to relate to the younger generation. And plus, I'm a father. I've got 3 kids, right? Now they're all older, 27, 23, and 20. So, I'm a dad, right? And I know how kids think. I know how parents engage with schools. I know how parents feel, and so there are times where, I'll have parents come in and we have the opportunity to chat about their son as parents, not necessarily as the president of the school and as parent, and then as parents of a student, but parent to parent.
Yeah. I the one word that always sticks out for me when I think of Fordham Prep, and one thing that I try to talk about a lot on this podcast is legacy. Mm-hmm. So Fordham Prep has a long-standing legacy. 1841. Yes. Right. Founded 1841. Here we are in 2025, and it's still relevant. Yeah. How do you preserve that legacy? What does it mean to you to represent it, and how do you try to preserve it and move it forward?
So there's a resiliency to Fordham Prep, right? And let's talk about the Bronx for a second, right? Yep. You're a Bronx guy, right? Yep. The Bronx is a resilient borough. It's been through so many changes, right, throughout its history. Some good, some bad, but it's still standing, and it's a strong, in my opinion, it's as strong as ever. So the Bronx drew me back in some ways. So in a sense, the school's resiliency, the school's ability to withstand the test of time is, runs parallel to the Bronx and what the Bronx has experienced. But I think for a school like Fordham Prep, as a Catholic Jesuit school, a values-based education matters, right? It means a lot to people. To be able to send out into this world graduates who lead with integrity, right? Who put the needs of others before their own. These are things that Fordham Prep in particular has always emphasized, has always done. And we keep doing it. So that tradition that part of the tradition of educating the character and for the character of an individual has never changed. Now, look, students learn much differently than they do today, so we have to adjust pedagogically. Yeah. We have to find responsible ways of integrating technology into the curriculum. We have to make sure that we're preparing them also academically and socially for a very different world. Yes. Than when you were entering into in 1999. And so all of those things, just being attentive, paying attention, helps you to stay strong.
Interesting. One thing that stands out for me is the fact that we are a Jesuit we are a Jesuit school. It's a Catholic school, but it's by the Jesuit priests. And and I had mentioned this to you that my understanding of the Jesuits is that they have a different relationship, and the way to God might not necessarily be so strict, and it's finding your own way. How does that play into the education and the teachers and the faculty there?
Yeah, so the way to God, in some ways, the way to establishing a meaningful relationship with God, the Jesuits would tell you, is not a straight path, like you said. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it veers off, right? Sometimes, and more than likely, there are going to be obstacles that get in the way. So the Jesuits, from when I was a student in college and I had the Jesuits to when I started teaching at Fordham Prep and had a lot of Jesuits helping to guide me, it was always about meeting students, in this case, where they are in their spiritual journeys, in their life journeys, and doing almost an inventory of where they stand and getting a sense of, well, what do they need to go to that next place? Yep. So it's a real sense of being open to the needs of the students that sit in front of us. Yep. One of the phrases that is used often in Jesuit education, and we use it, of course, at Fordham Prep, is cura personalis, right? Cura personalis means care for the individual, where we look at every student that comes into Fordham Prep as a unique person, a unique individual with different needs. And so we have to pay attention to that. And so if you pay attention to that, a student feels more comfortable, a student's mind and heart and eyes open to the possibilities in front of him. And that gives us a chance to then guide them towards something greater, whatever that might be.
The Emmaus retreat for me was very impactful. And I know you guys just had you had mentioned this morning that you had the freshman retreat.
Right.
I don't remember there being a freshman retreat when I was there, if there was. But the Emmaus retreat specifically, how does the school come up with that, with curating that and making that really impactful? Because it was so impactful on me. I was looking at it like, hey, all right, we get a couple days off. We get to go on a small vacation, some days off of school. And then I get there and it's like, all right, bring your marble notebook and tell us about your relationship with God. And I was not expecting it all, but it was super impactful for me.
Yeah.
So how do you guys continue to keep that so impactful, and how does it get curated? And
I'm not sure if the attitude that you had going into it changed that much. I think a lot of the guys will go and they'll think the same way, right? They'll think a couple days off of school, we go out to Long Island, I'm going out to Long Island, in a place near the water, it'll be relaxing, I don't have any classes. And sure, hey, listen, in some ways, the work we do with boys, we say whatever it takes to get them there. And once they're there is when the transformation happens. Yep. Right? So you have 30 or 35, 16, 17-year-old young men who descend on a retreat house. And over a 2 to 3 day period, they begin to find themselves in new and unique ways. And that happens due in large part to the organization of the retreat, the cadence of the retreat. In retreats like this, you don't dive in quickly, right? You don't say, Tell me about your relationship with God, because that could be intimidating for some.
Course.
You begin just by inviting them to talk about themselves, right? Which is hard to begin with.
Of course.
But they're familiar with themselves. So you begin to talk about, who are you? Like, what do you want from life? What has your life been like up to this point? And then eventually you layer on top of that more impactful question, perhaps, right? Things that might be a little bit more challenging. And all of a sudden, you've got these 16 and 17-year-old boys sitting in small groups or sitting around a circle, and all of a sudden, they're opening themselves up to their classmates like you did, right?
Yep.
In ways you never thought possible. And certainly, you wouldn't be doing that in the cafeteria. You wouldn't be doing that walking through the hallways. You wouldn't be doing it at a party on a Friday or a Saturday night. You just wouldn't, because those environments that don't lend themselves to this. So we invite you to be vulnerable. And once you realize that being vulnerable is a pathway towards clarity and towards seeing life a little differently, something happens. And it's different for each person, So
it's so interesting that you mentioned vulnerability, because the one of the things that I stumbled upon a group of men, right? Maybe about a year and a half ago. It's called the ACE group. And it's Action Cultivates Excellence. And their motto is bridging the gap between masculinity and vulnerability. And they do outdoor workouts. So you'll go there, you'll do a cold plunge, you'll do a workout, and then they have like a networking breakfast. But they also do these dinners where it's for men only. And they break down into these smaller groups where you're being vulnerable and you're talking about these sort of things that you would not necessarily talk about in other environments. So it's just so interesting to me that I did that when I was in high school.
Yep.
And then as a 40-something-year-old man, I'm going and I'm seeking the same sort of connections that I did when I was in the prep. And that kind of just reinforces for me how important it was to do it then, because if I never did it then, I might not be so comfortable doing it now.
Oh, yeah, it takes courage. There's no doubt. It takes courage to walk into those moments, especially as men, right? We put up walls, right? We have, we generally, keep our feelings to ourselves. So I think it's a courageous move, but I think it leads to great clarity, I think, in your life.
Yep. How did you? So I kind of want to just back up a little bit. Yeah. So before you were named the president at the prep, you were working at where were you before that?
So for the 15 years before coming back to Fordham Prep, I was at Loyola Blakefield. It's a Jesuit school down in Baltimore.
Okay.
And for 5 years, I was the principal, and for the last 10, I was the president.
Down in Baltimore, huh?
Down in Baltimore.
Okay. Is there a similarity between Baltimore and the Bronx?
No. Well, I say that only because this is home for me, right? The Bronx is home because it's where I started my career, and I feel very comfortable there. But the tri-state area is home. So, Baltimore, it was a great place to spend 15 years. I loved the school. I loved the people. My sons went to the school. My daughter went to school down there. So they really grew up in a sense in Baltimore and the surrounding area. So I really loved it. It was a great place to be. But there was this unsettled feeling that I had that I wanted to be back here, that I really did. And my wife and I started talking about it probably about a year before I learned of the Fordham Prep opportunity, about coming back, right? Okay. About returning to the tri-state area. And she and I started dating when I started working at the prep as a teacher in 1992. So she has been with me through my whole journey, and she's been through the highs and the lows of everything, right? So we started talking about how great would it be if at some point we could return to the tri-state area, but what if I was able to go back to Fordham Prep and I was able to round out my career at the place that gave me my start.
Is that prior to you learning that there was an opening at the prep, or so you put it out in the world?
We just, we put it out for ourselves and said, would we do it? Would we come back if the right opportunity came our way and I could get back to Fordham Prep? And we both said, yeah, let's do it. And then here we are.
Well, that is that would be considered the law of attraction.
Yeah, indeed.
And as a business, as a businessman, for me, I stumbled upon the law of attraction many, many years ago. And it's just putting these positive thoughts out into the world. And then what it does is it gives it power. And it kind of, if you keep putting it out there, it will just lead you to that direction. And that's exactly what you did.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe unknowingly.
Yeah, totally unknowingly.
Maybe unknowingly.
Yeah.
But you started at the prep. So in 1992,
yes,
you are brand new teacher, first year.
Yes.
And what subject did you teach?
English.
English. And you taught English the entire time that you were there?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me about that experience, being a new teacher, going into the prep in 1992. What is going through your mind, and what are things that impacted you those first couple of years?
Yeah, I was scared. There's no doubt about it. I was scared because I had no idea what I was doing, right? I mean, I just graduated from college. I had no idea. My life's plan was not to be a teacher. I didn't know what it was, but there was a Jesuit at St. Peter's College where I went and I got my undergrad degree in English. There was a Jesuit who worked in the campus ministry office there, and I became very close with him. He ultimately married my wife and I.
Okay.
And he said, Anthony, in like the late winter of 1992-ish, around there, he said, "What are you going to do when you graduate?" I said, "You know what? I'm not exactly sure. You know, my father thinks I should go to law school."
Okay.
That was not what I thought. So, so he said, "Well, I think, have you ever thought about teaching?" I said, "I haven't. It had never entered my mind." He says, "Well, I think you might be a good teacher for whatever reason."
Okay.
I appreciate him seeing something maybe in me that I didn't see. He said, "Well, there's a school in the Bronx. It's a Jesuit high school, Fordham Prep. They're looking for an English teacher. I would just suggest, I was there. I think it's a great school. I'd suggest that you apply." So one thing leads to another, right? I apply to the school. I get a call. I go in. I have my series of interviews, and I ultimately am offered the job. But what's most meaningful for me about that experience and where I am today is, so there's a desk in the president's office, and that desk has been used by my 5 predecessors.
Okay.
Right? So in 1992, let's say it was April of 1992, when I was interviewing with the president at the time, Father Ed Maloney, I was actually sitting on the other side of that desk, being interviewed by Father Maloney.
Same desk that is yours now.
Same desk that is mine now. And now, all these years later, 33 years later, I am now sitting on the other side of that desk. And so I owe a lot to Father Maloney for believing in me and trusting me. But when I got to the prep, look, I looked younger than a lot of the seniors and some of the underclassmen as well. And so it was a little intimidating. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But Fordham Prep, and we still do this, right? We will take men and women who may never have had any experience teaching, but they have the content knowledge, English, history, religion, French, Spanish, calculus, whatever it may be.
Yep.
If you have the content knowledge, we have an academic team and department chairs that can help you become a great teacher. And Fordham Prep, I would not say I was a great teacher, but Fordham Prep did, what they needed to do to help me to understand what it meant to be a teacher.
Yeah.
I loved everything about it, but I felt incredibly supported. That continues to this day. So for my 7 years as a teacher at Fordham Prep, they were some of the most meaningful years of my professional life. And you guys humbled me a lot, and maybe I needed a little bit of that.
Well, 1992, I mean, it was a much different time, and you're going into a school where, you're going into school in the Bronx, and you're dealing with, I guess were you teaching all 4 years, or was it just freshmen, sophomores?
Yeah, when I first got there, I taught 5 sections of freshman English. So the class in 1996, who will have their big reunion coming up next year, I taught many of the members of that class. So I started it with those guys. And so 5 sections of freshman English was actually a great way to learn. It really
and
was.
You grow with the class.
You grow with the class, right, exactly.
Right, you grow with the class. Any pivotal moments in those first couple years that really taught you what it meant to be a teacher and change your direction, or maybe solidified the direction that you had chosen?
That's a great question. Yeah, there's probably so long ago, right? But there's so many. There were no doubt about it. Most of the experiences were challenges, right? And I like that, right? I accept the challenge, right? I accept the challenge to become a better teacher, whatever that means. But early on, the passion that grew out of this happened very quickly. And I loved teaching right from the beginning. And I think part of the reason that I loved it was because of the challenge, right? But also because the Fordham Prep students, and it's still true to this day, there was a real excitement about you guys, right? You are a joyful, excitable group of young men, right? And you're good people.
That's very nice of you.
Yeah, I know.
That's
well,
very
listen,
nice of you.
I know. Yeah. Well, you know what? Your class was a different story, but there was an excitement and a joy that you brought to my life, you know. And I never felt like in 33 years, I never felt like I worked a day in my life.
That's awesome.
I remember being at my first back to school night. Now, back to school night is where all the parents come to school and they follow their son's schedule, right?
Yes.
And we as young teachers, we had to be educated on how to do this, right? How do you carry yourself and what do you do in these things? So these are like, you have 5 minutes, maybe it was a little bit more, but whatever it is, say 5 to 10 minutes you have with each class.
Oh, because they're going into like, okay, so freshman English, first period. Now you have all the kids' parents in that class
All the
for
kids'
5 minutes.
Yeah, all the kids' parents, and then they go to math and they go. So I have my first class, and here I am. Yeah, well, I was told first of all by one of the more experienced English teachers. He said, "Listen," he said, "you have to make sure that you leave no time for questions." Leave no time for questions because you may, and he's right. You may not be ready to answer them. You've only been teaching for 3 or 4 weeks, so what you know. So he says, you present your curriculum, you go through it in as much detail as you can. You keep your eye on on the clock because we didn't have phones or anything at that time, right? So you just have to keep your eye on the clock and make sure that you go right to the time that it ends. So I go in there, I have everything ready, and we had our, let's call it a 10-minute block of time with these families, and 10 minutes is a long time.
Oh yeah, when you're just speaking.
Yeah, when you're just speaking, 10 minutes is an eternity.
It's not like you're opening up for questions. You're trying to not open up for questions.
That's exactly right. So I started, I was going through all of it, and then I felt like, I felt good. I said, wow, I think I got through that. And I look at the clock. I had only been speaking for like 4 minutes. And then I did the next worst thing, and that was instead of just letting them go early, which at this point in my career I probably would do. I said, anybody have any questions?
Because it's a natural thing to say.
Well,
anybody have any questions?
Yeah, and I'm a nice guy, and I feel like they're paying a tuition. So I remember this so clearly. I'm standing in the front. The room is packed. Of course, all the freshman parents come. Right? They all come.
Of course.
Packed, standing room only. They're along the perimeter of the room. And in the back left-hand corner, there's a father that's standing, and he raises his hand. And I said, yes, sir. And he says, I just have one question for you. What qualifies you to teach my son English? I mean, the only answer I had in it, was, well, I have a degree in English from St. Peter's College. That was the best I could do. And then I think at that point I probably blacked out. But I think at that point, I think the class was over and they left. So that was a real test. It was a great question. And I mean, what did it teach me? It taught me to pay attention to the clock a little bit better. And also, but what it also taught me is just be honest with your answers.
Yes.
Don't try to fabricate or create something that may be inauthentic. And that was the best that I could do. So there was that, and I coached at Fordham Prep, so I really got to experience, other side of students and see them outside of the classroom.
What did you coach?
So I coached baseball for 2 years, freshman baseball, and then I started the volleyball program.
Oh, really?
In 1995, and then coached that the rest of my way there. And so to see, you guys outside of the classroom was really meaningful.
You see their personalities more.
Oh yeah, the personalities really emerge, outside of the classroom in different
when people
ways.
are doing things that they enjoy doing, their personalities come out. Because sitting in a classroom, for a lot of, I went to private school before that, so I was used to the tie and the, getting dressed up. But for a lot of students, they were never used to that.
Yeah.
So seeing, sitting there in a classroom with a tie on that's super uncomfortable and a suit jacket on and shoes, you're not going to see their personality. But seeing it on the other end, I can imagine really helped you build relationships with people more.
Yeah, it did. And, I'll just answer your question about just one more example. I didn't know if I was a good teacher. I really had no idea. but you want to know that you're at least reaching your students, right? You want some indication. We do surveys and things like that. The administration does surveys, but there are other indicators as to whether or not you're reaching your students and whether or not you have established a meaningful relationship with them. I think the first time that I realized that I had done that is when the first set of students at Fordham Prep started asking me to write letters of recommendation for college.
Ah, okay.
And I thought, wow, you're asking me to write this letter, that might, either make or break you, as and it really, the recommendations don't ultimately do that. But as a young teacher, it's very important, and you should be honored if you're asked.
Yes.
So when I was asked, I thought, wow, what an honor. I consider that to be an incredible honor. And I think at that point I realized that, I must be connecting with these guys in some way.
Yeah, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I just thought about that for a moment. You only ask specific teachers that you built those relationships with.
Usually two.
Yeah. I don't remember who I asked for my recommendation letters, but I imagine, there were a couple teachers in the prep that really stood out for me, right? Like Mr. Fisher was one of them. Yeah. That was an absolute, he really knew how to communicate. Yeah. My style of communication. And now being in business, I understand that my style of communication is very straight to the point, no BS, no small talk, just kind of get right to it. Yeah. And Mr. Fisher was very impactful. Mr. Carney, Martin Carney. Yep. Brian Carney was impactful too. I think he taught math.
When you were there.
Yeah, he was very impactful as well. And it's so interesting that you gravitate towards the teachers that you connect with. I had a bunch of teachers that I did not necessarily connect with, maybe because of the subject or their personalities or my personality or whatever. How do you try to connect? Being the president, your job is to connect with the entire, as much as possible, the entire, student base there. How do you try to do that, and how do you do that on an individual basis?
Yeah, it's harder when you're not a classroom teacher, right? So you have to be much more intentional about it. I learned over my career in administration, especially, the importance of being present. So the Jesuits speak often about something called the ministry of presence. To be present to somebody doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be in full-blown conversation with them. It means that you're there, right? Okay. That you're among them. And when you're with them, you express a real joy about being there, right? You try to avoid distractions. So for me, I have to get out of the office, right? You have to force yourself as an administrator to get up out of your seat from behind your desk and walk outside. Now at Fordham Prep, we've got this administrative wing. Yep. So in theory, you could stay there as an administrator all day, every day, and get all your business done right there.
Is that the wing on the left side where the cafeteria is?
Yeah. So when you walk in the main entrance to the prep, it's actually on the right.
Okay.
On the left-hand side is admissions now. I can't remember what it was when you were there, but
I do remember there being an administration wing.
It's always been there.
I only went in there a couple times. You don't really have to go in there all the time, but that's where the big wigs were.
Right, and that's a problem, right? When the students don't walk through there. Now they walk in there more often maybe now than when you were there for whatever reason. So we do get some students that come in, and I have students that come to see me for different things. And I enjoy that. But I have to force myself as an administrator to get up and get out. And the minute I walk out of the administrative wing and I walk into the Commons, for example, and I see the energy, and you feel the energy. Yeah. And, it feels really good. It feels right. And then, I'll walk around. I'll hang out with the boys. I'll go walk through the hallways as much as I can, and try to get to know them. I'll go to I like go to sports events. I'll go to the plays. I'll go to the musical performances, and that's my way. It does a couple things, right? It reminds me of why I'm doing what I do, right? Because they're the heartbeat of the school, right? Yep. The students are the reason Fordham Prep exists. And we're fortunate to have tremendous educators in that building who inspire them every day. But they're the reason we're there. Yeah. If we had no students, there'd be nothing for us to do. So that's why we're there. And so it's a great reminder to me of why I do what I do. And it also gives, I get a lot of stories that I then can share,
for sure.
with people.
A lot of the things that you're saying remind me of running a business. Be present, right? Focus on the student, focus on the individuals. how do you balance building those relationships with the students and also running the business of the prep?
Yeah, that's the juggling act, right? That you have to do, because it's also a nonprofit business, and we in the world of presidents and CFOs of Jesuit schools in particular, we talk about no margin, no mission, right? And so we have to make sure that we are every year presenting to the board a balanced budget. Right? We have to make sure that we are doing our part to use our financial resources responsibly, that we are doing our best to take care of people. And so it's a real balancing act. And I try, when I was a teacher, I never understood that, right? Because it wasn't the world that I was living in. And I never understood why people said, well, schools, not private schools and Catholic schools, have a business side to them. And as a teacher, I never really understood that because I didn't have to.
Of course.
Right now, I think the teachers are much more sophisticated than when I was there, and they do understand all of that. And so it's just a balancing act. But what allows me to focus on the business side and managing the finances of the school, doing the necessary fundraising, trying to generate appropriate revenue so that we have the funding to do all the great things at the prep. What pushes me to do that is when I get out of the building and I see who we're serving. Yeah. Right. So when I see who we're serving, both our faculty, staff, and students, and alumni, because we still serve you guys.
And we appreciate it.
Well, no, listen, that's the least we could do. It says to me, okay, you've got to make sure you're making responsible financial decisions to ensure that this place never goes away and that it's sustainable.
I constantly use the slogan "Men for Others" constantly, and I had no idea during those 4 years, after hearing it day in and day out and seeing it on the walls and understand and really subconsciously, I guess, taking it inside of who I am as a human being. But like I try to live my life in that direction, and I think it's super important for the prep to continue to foster that sort of environment for kids, because you don't know, I'm a perfect example, right? I wasn't the best student in the prep, right? I fought it. My parents were like, you're going to go to the prep. I'm like, I don't want to go to the prep. I want to go to Spelman. I want to go where there's going to be girls. And my parents were like, nope, you don't know. You don't understand it now. When you're older, you'll understand. This is the best place for you, so on and so forth. And, I fought it. So I didn't necessarily want to go. So I didn't really embrace it as much as I should have. How does it feel to sit down with alumni and people that were there at this point in their lives and see how much the prep has impacted them in their lives?
Well, you're a perfect illustration of it. I mean, you're talking about it right here, right? Yeah. You really are. And so this conversation, right? They're all different, right? They're all the conversations with alumni are different, right? Because each of you bring a unique perspective, right? You share unique and different stories. But what you all have in common is that you want to talk about it. Yeah. You want to talk about what Fordham Prep meant, what Fordham Prep did for you. But I think we need to continue to talk about what you did for Fordham Prep, right? It's when you guys move out and or even when you're moving through Fordham Prep, prospective families see the current students. Yeah. Other than the teachers, who are amongst our greatest ambassadors, the students are right there too, right? Because prospective families, when they come in 8th grade and they start looking around the prep, they come to open houses and things like that. They're seeing our current students who, you were that person, Steve, when you were there, right? And these parents say, I want my son to be like him. I want my son to, and now when they look at alumni, they're like, wow, I really want my son to be like that. And if Fordham Prep is a stepping stone to becoming that type of a person, I want my son to have that experience. And so when you guys tell me the stories about what, how impactful the Fordham Prep education was, how impactful the Fordham Prep community was to you, and then you give me stories, I bring those out, right? I bring those out and tell other people, but you guys also remind me of why I do what I do. So. Another
similarity with business, right? Like for me, when I see the joy of somebody who closes on their first house, or is able to sell their house and downsize or able to build wealth for their family, that joy that brings them, it reminds me of all those countless phone calls and emails and text messages. So again, your position is so similar to that of being in business, but you're serving, first of all, the Fordham Prep community, but you're serving God.
Oh yeah. Oh my God. No doubt about it. Yeah. I mean, this is God's work, right? We're doing God's work, and it doesn't feel like a heavy lift. Sometimes it does, but because we love what we do, it doesn't feel, it's never a burden for us. None of this is a burden for any of us that work in this world.
I think any parent wants their child to have a career that they, first of all, feel fulfilled and they don't feel like it's working. Right? Like enjoy what you do, enjoy what you do, and you never feel like you're working a day in your life.
Yeah.
You're like an example. You're perfectly an example of that.
Yeah, I love what I do.
How does the Jesuit way of the Jesuit order play into the Prep's mission?
Yeah.
And how do you balance that? Is there somebody in particular in the Jesuit order that you speak with on a maybe semi-regular basis and talk about the direction?
So there, all of that. The answer to all of that is a yes, right? There's all of that. There are fewer Jesuits now in our schools than there were certainly when you were there, and even just a few short years ago. But the Jesuits began to see their numbers decline about 20 years ago. And they realized, gosh, we have fewer Jesuits who are going to be staffing our Jesuit high schools. So we need to really begin preparing lay women and men to take on these responsibilities. So we learned a lot from them on what it meant to lead and educate in this Jesuit tradition, right? So we owe a lot to them for helping us out. But in terms of the way that the Jesuit order is hierarchically sort of organized, so we're a part of what's known as the USA East Province.
Okay.
It runs from Portland, Maine, down to Atlanta, Georgia.
Okay.
And within that province are Jesuit apostolates. And the Jesuit apostolates are grammar schools, our parishes, our high schools, our colleges and universities, our social service programs, our parishes. So that and our Jesuit communities. And so all of that makes up the works of the province. And overseeing the province is the provincial. He's like the head Jesuit.
Okay.
Right? He's the head Jesuit who oversees all of the works. He oversees all of the Jesuits in the province. And those who run Jesuit apostolates as presidents or in other capacities, but you're like the executive director.
The school would be considered a Jesuit apostolate.
Yes, Jesuit apostolate, right. Okay. We also, so as the president of Fordham Prep and any executive director of a Jesuit work or apostolate is also known as the director of the work with a capital W.
That's you.
That's me.
Okay.
So I have the title of president.
Director of work.
And director of the work.
That's a powerful. I like director of work.
It's a really
director of work. Sounds pretty good.
And the work is with a capital W, because the work is making sure that, in our case, Fordham Prep continues to maintain its Catholic Jesuit identity and charism. That's a big part of my responsibility. Yeah, that's the work, right? And so the East Coast province and other provinces across the country, a number of years ago, introduced a sponsorship review.
Okay.
Right? It's sort of the Jesuit accreditation process, if you will. And there's all kinds of benchmarks that we look to meet, and hallmarks and things like that, and priorities. And so we are measured on that every 10 years. We do a self-study based and a deep dive reflection, which results in a self-study on essentially our Catholic Jesuit identity. And then a team of Jesuit educators comes in, and then they measure us on that.
Really?
Yeah, and I think it's a great thing, because people ask, how are you going to maintain your Catholic Jesuit identity when you have fewer Jesuits? That's how.
What does that mean, Catholic Jesuit identity? Like, is there a difference between, like, how do the Jesuits measure it? Different from, I guess, standard Catholicism?
Oh, no. Okay, that's a great question. Yeah, so I would say that, the Jesuits don't exist without the Catholic Church.
Of course.
Right? So they exist within the church. And so whatever, so we promote and we support and we emphasize the values of the Catholic Church, right? And the teachings of the church and gospel values. The Jesuit order came to be so that they could become teachers, right? They can become philosophers. They can become researchers, right? They have become and emerged as an order of some of the brightest minds out there, right? One of the the brightest minds of any, and I say this because I've been with them so long, any ordained clerical order, and so. You maintain your identity as a Catholic school,
Yep.
right?
That's first and foremost.
First and foremost, we are a Catholic school. We don't exist without the Catholic Church,
Of course.
and I think that's something that we continue to emphasize. And then you've got this Jesuit, let's call it a charism, or this Jesuit way of proceeding,
Okay.
right? That takes Catholicism and sort of makes it maybe more tangible for people. Maybe takes the value of Catholicism and says, let's take the gospel values. Maybe it's let me say this: the Jesuits are action oriented.
Okay.
So let's take the values of Catholicism and let's not just talk about it. Let's go live it out. Let's take it into the world. Maybe that's the best way to characterize, how the Jesuits take Catholicism and make it vibrant and almost explosive in a way that excites people. St. Ignatius had a phrase, although it's attributed to St. Ignatius, whether he said it or not. I think that's been debated or debatable. But it's a phrase, go set the world on fire.
Okay.
And that's what the Jesuits have been doing. So the first Jesuit school was founded in 1548
Okay.
in Sicily.
Really? Okay.
And from that point to now, graduates of Jesuit schools have been setting the world on fire. You're doing it.
Yeah. I try. I try. And I personally, and I can't underemphasize the impact that the prep played on my personal life and on my faith. And again, just going back to my point of how I was kind of like you're force-fed going to church as a kid. Let's just be honest. Kids don't want to sit on Sunday morning and sit in church at 8 o'clock mass. You're force-fed it. And then you end up going through school, 8 years of grammar school. Well, I did 4 years of grammar school, and then I did the last 4 years in a private school. And then I went to Fordham Prep. So you're force-fed it. So by the time you hit 12th grade, and it's like, wait, I don't have to go to church every day?
Yeah.
Like, I don't have to. You kind of just run away from it. And then it's so interesting how I found my way back. Like, I'm currently going back and reading the Bible. I try to read the Bible, and I try to do that only to connect back with God and remind myself to put God first. And I wouldn't have been able, I don't think I would be doing that if I didn't spend those 4 years at the prep. And I just like to, emphasize that what you guys are doing there and what the faculty, the staff, the Jesuits, how important it is. And listen, I just personally want to say thank you, because it was so impactful for me that I just wouldn't be who I am today in business and personally.
Fordham Prep I'm glad to hear that. And I think that's meaningful that you continue to carry that with you, right? And you continue to explore ways that your faith can inform the way you live your life. That's really what it is. Look, I think Fordham Prep has a responsibility to the church. I think we have a responsibility to help build. Some might say rebuild the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church has come on hard times. There's no doubt about it. Of course, right? For a variety of reasons,
gets a
which
bad
we don't
rap
need to get into it.
Yeah,
absolutely. But there are really good people in the Catholic Church, and the Catholic faith is a value-based faith, right? The gospel values of love, compassion, empathy, integrity, care, love. I mean, who wouldn't want to project that out into the world? But for whatever reason, we find that there are fewer and fewer young people going to church.
Yep.
Okay. I am certainly not here to judge. That's not why I bring this up. But I bring this up because I think, for whatever reason, they may have their reasons, but you should see what it's like to attend Mass at Fordham Prep. Students are singing. Students are engaged. Students are joyful in those moments, right? Now, we've got 960 boys in the church, and I don't know if every one of them, right, are into it or engaged.
But it's a numbers game.
But the feeling and what I'm witnessing is something I don't see in church on Sunday. Is that, energy, and is that joy? I think part of the reason is because they're together, right? When you worship, you want to worship with people who you really care about, who you're really connected with. And now some parishes are like that. Parishes, have it. There are a number up in Westchester that I'm aware of that do have that. But at Fordham Prep, you put 960 boys in a church for Mass, and they start singing, the opening hymn and things like that. And so if that can be replicated, in every church, every Sunday, I think it just, you'll see numbers, you'll see the attendance grow. But I do think, the boys are connecting with their faith. There's no doubt about it. And that's going to help, I think, ultimately the church.
I had, I'm not sure if I had mentioned this to you before, but so my faith is a bit untraditional. My father was an Austrian. His roots are an Austrian Jew, and my mother was an Irish Catholic. And when they married in the 70s, it was not very common. So he believed that we should be raised in the faith of our mother, which is how I was raised in the Catholic Church. So I did, all the sacraments, and I went through the Catholic schools. And my father embracing his wife's religion and allowing his children to be raised in that faith, kind of it plays perfect into the Jesuit sort of tradition of meeting people where they are.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm a great example of that because of the fact that my father. So I didn't even realize it, right? I'm raised in this household that is untraditional, and then I go into the Jesuit school that is teaching children to be, or young men to be, to embrace their faith untraditionally. It was just the perfect sort of melting pot for me.
Yeah, well, your dad was unique in that he sort of gave that over, to your mom, right? Because the 70s were a very different time, and it was generally, the man, made the decisions on, how you would, how your faith would be nurtured, right? And what faith. So I really admire your dad for doing that. But what a unique experience for you to have. And then you bring that experience to Fordham Prep, and then a whole new world for you is opened up. And I would think that that those experiences that you had in this multi-faith family really enhanced the experience of people at Fordham Prep too. We have a number of students not dissimilar to you, right, who are at Fordham Prep right now. There is a family that lives directly across the street from me. They have two twin boys who are sophomores at Fordham Prep, and mom's Jewish, dad's Catholic. The children have been raised in the Jewish tradition, and they're at Fordham Prep.
Wow,
and
that is
it's not
amazing.
Dissimilar, except the role the faiths are reversed with mom and dad,
of course,
in your case, but
seeing both sides of the coin.
And those boys bring such life and vibrancy and experience to Fordham Prep that helps to inform others around them. So I love that Fordham Prep continues to be a place that draws people also from other faith cultures, right? So we have Muslims, we have those of the Jewish faith, we have Hindus. It's just, and of course we have Catholics, and so we're really fortunate to have all of those faiths represented at the school.
Is it common in Catholic schools to have students of other faiths there?
Well, I think, we're mostly Catholic. So, we're like 75% of our students identify as practicing Catholics. And then, the other 15% either are not practicing anything or in these other religions that I talked about. I don't think it's uncommon to see that. I think partly because it's the values-based education. And there's a spiritual grounding. And we are not in the business of conversion, right? Or forced conversion.
Yeah, of course.
But if a student, and we've had it in our Jesuit schools and at Fordham Prep, there have been several students who, over my time in Jesuit education, entered into a Jesuit high school, non-practicing, certainly not Catholic, who, as they walked through this experience, made the decision to convert to Catholicism. What a powerful experience.
Yeah.
And what an opportunity for us and for that young person. And so I think families of other faith backgrounds come to us, like I said, because of the values and that spiritual grounding, and also because we embrace other religions. Yeah. We welcome it, right? We are informed by it, and we are a better school and a more complete community for having people of different faiths, in this particular case, with us.
Yeah. WWJD, what would Jesus do? He would allow everybody to come in.
Yeah, you said it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so impactful. And for anybody who's listening to this that is considering sending their son to the prep and maybe thought that you have to be Catholic to go there, I think it's important to emphasize that it is such an all-inclusive sort of environment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All are welcome.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
If you're starting your own school today, what are 3 non-negotiable elements that you have to prioritize?
Any school or a Catholic school?
A Catholic school.
Okay. Well, first of all, educators need the best teachers, right? That's first and foremost, right? Mm-hmm. They sell the school, because you could have a beautiful, shiny building, right? Mm-hmm. And that shiny new building will get people in the door. Yep. But what's most important is what's happening, right, inside that building. Okay. And so you need great educators. That's what you need first and foremost. You need a mission, right? You need a focus, right? And I think as a Catholic school, the mission is clear, right? Values based. I've said that on more than one occasion, but that's the reality. The gospel values, right? And you stay true to that, right? You make that you make those gospel values your guiding principles. Yep. Now you have that foundation. So good teachers, that clear Catholic values mission, and then facilities do matter. Facilities do matter. And we have to pay attention to what types of facilities we're putting our students in, because students learn differently in different environments. So we want to make sure that it's an environment in which they feel excited to learn, they feel comfortable learning. So I would say those 3. I mean, I'd start there, but then we can go down rabbit holes, of course, on what else it takes to build a school. So,
what are some programs that are maybe now at the prep that maybe weren't there when I was there in the late 90s?
Yeah, other than the strong academics, right, which continue to grow. That's always going to be great. The great education that we offer, that's going to be a hallmark of a Fordham Prep education, always, right? But the iSTEAM movement, right, has continued to gain momentum. So we have cyber programs at Fordham Prep, which of course was not a thing. No, in the 90s, nobody was really, not in high schools, talking about that.
I do remember the computer room upstairs above the library, and I rember having to wait at the printer for stuff to have to come out. And I didn't have a computer at home; I'd have to go there to print out stuff.
Matrix printer, I think. So we have a makerspace. Right, so we have a required sophomore computer class as well. So all of those things are different. I will say one of the things that I love about Fordham Prep, that I believe is a differentiator, is our global education program. Okay. Students can come to Fordham Prep and literally travel the world. I mean, they could go all over the world. So this global ed program takes students to Cuba, to Rwanda, to Japan, to China, to Ireland, to Milan, to Costa Rica.
Like a student exchange program, a foreign exchange program?
The one in Ireland and the one in Milan is a brief student exchange program with students from a Jesuit school in Ireland and a Jesuit school in Milan. But the others are deep cultural immersion programs all around the world.
Really?
I mean, you can go to Fordham Prep and you can get your passport stamped in multiple countries over 4 years. But, one of the things and the reason that exists is because one of the things that Jesuit education has always emphasized, and Fordham Prep, I think, does it better than anybody, is the importance of being a global citizen. And to be in order to be a global citizen, you have to understand the world. You have to understand the people that live beyond the borders of the United States and get to know them. And so that global education program, that's an invitation for those young men to be able to experience that. So I would say that is awesome. Was not there when you were there. So I think that is probably, in my opinion, the most significant addition to the prep since you've been there.
I noticed when I was there for the reunion that I noticed the old intramural gym has turned into an amazing weight room.
Yeah.
How did that come to be? And was there a need for it, or it was just something that you guys wanted to do for the students and the student athletes?
I think it's a little bit of both, really. There was a real need there. There's no doubt about it, because in schools, like I said to you earlier, right, if you're building a new school, you want to make sure you have the right facilities, right? And it's an honor and it's a privilege for our students to play on a sport at Fordham Prep, and they recognize that. None of them take it for granted. I think they see it, as something really special. But we want to make sure that we give them the facilities, right, that meet their needs as growing student athletes. And so that intramural gym is now the health and wellness center, and it is, is a lot different than from when you were there. From the cardio machines to the free weights.
It's top notch.
Yeah, it is.
I walked in there and I'm there for the reunion, but I'm like, listen, I want to get a quick workout in.
Yeah. It draws you in.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But when we do things like that, so the student athletes use it, and there's some training programs, and it's great, but anyone can use it, right? That's not exclusively
to the athletes. Ah, okay.
Right. So you might have a student who is not on a team, may have no interest in being on a team, and instead wants to work out. No problem, right? You can go in there, as long as it's supervised, of course, right? You can go in there and you can work out. Our athletic facilities that we have at Fordham Prep are not exclusively saved for just student athletes, right? That's not what we're all about, right? We're not about saying, well, you're not a basketball player, so you can't shoot in this gym, right? Or you're not on the rugby team, so you can't use the free weights.
That's a huge value add.
Anybody can
That's
use
a huge value add for students that are coming in that, you see that gym, and, if you're not an athlete, but, some people they like to go in the gym and work out.
Yeah.
And they could use it. How did it come to be? Do you have to fundraise for that, or is that something that's like part of the budget coming up, or how does it actually come to be?
So that all took place before I got here.
Oh,
just the finishing touches were being put on it just as I was arriving.
Okay.
But I've been involved in a number of major fundraising campaigns for buildings. So I've been involved in a lot of building projects, both in academic buildings as well as athletic complexes. And so the way that this plays out is you sort of do an assessment, right? You do a facilities assessment, and you're like, well, what are some of the needs that we have? And there's always wants in there as well, but you always go to the needs first. And we recognize that there was a real need for an upgrade on our athletic training facilities, and so and we push really hard, making healthy decisions, right? Taking care of your body, right? And as much as you take care of your spirit, take care of your body as well.
Of course,
right? And so
you only got one of them.
Yeah, right. You're right. And so we were, so what we had to offer was not in terms of the workout space, was not aligned with that part of our mission. And so the school recognized there was a real need for this. So it was a fundraising campaign, raised a couple $1 million to get that done. And I think you'll see some more of that, building, some building and enhancements over the next few years.
Good. I something that sticks out to me always is the theater also.
Yeah.
I've noticed that the drama society has really taken some leaps and bounds from the time I was there.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm seeing somehow I ended up following them on Instagram.
Oh, yeah.
And like the stuff that they're doing is just really, it seems really amazing. Who runs the drama society and decides the types of plays that gets put forth there?
So one of my former students runs the Drama Society,
really?
class of 1998, so just a year ahead of you. TJ O'Sullivan.
Okay.
So TJ is both our director of the drama program. He's also our director of college counseling.
Well, TJ, you're doing a great job.
Yeah, he is. He is, right. You're right. It's just I mean, these are it's a Broadway quality theater.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And these are Broadway quality performances. And the amount of time and effort and energy that goes into putting on these performances is amazing to me. What I love there's so many things I love about our drama program, right? I enjoy going to them, right? It puts a smile on my face, right? But what I love more than anything is that TJ, when he thinks of, so he decides what shows are going to be done. When he decides on a show, he generally has shows that have larger casts. And if the script doesn't call for a large cast, he finds ways of allowing students to have an opportunity to be on the stage. So when you pick a show with a big cast,
put people on,
and kids want to be involved in it, but they might not be the best singer or they may not be the best actor at the moment, but they want to be there. He finds a role for them, whether it's as an extra or in the background. They're on the stage and they're experiencing drama at Fordham Prep. That's care personalis, right? That's that care for the individual that we were talking about earlier.
Do you guys still give out the bumper stickers when they get honors? I am a proud parent. I am a proud parent of an honor student at Fordham Prep.
No, we don't.
That was like that was a thing. You got honors. You got the bumper sticker.
I don't think we do, but I did. No. Did you ever get one?
So I went through all 4 years. My senior year, my brothers got bumper stickers. I was the subpar student, and my mom said to me, she said, "I want to get one bumper sticker from you." I said, "All right, Mom, this semester, I'm going to get you a bumper sticker." I went, got her a bumper sticker, got the honors.
Nice.
Just to get one, just so she could have it.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, no, I don't think we do that anymore. We give out honor certificate, like the certificates and all, and then they bring them home, put it on the refrigerator.
Those bumper stickers were cool, man. You see them all around the Bronx and Westchester.
They're all over. I know. We see them in every other school. I don't think we do it anymore.
Where do you see the prep in the next 5-10 years?
Yeah. So we just had our our new strategic plan approved by the board in our December board meeting. It's called Magis 2030. Okay. Magis is another term that is somewhat unique to Jesuit schools. Magis, the direct translation of magis from the Latin is more.
Okay.
We don't see it in that. We don't translate it literally, right, at Fordham Prep. So when we say magis, we don't mean let's just do more. We talk about let's be better, let's be stronger, right? And that's what magis means to us, being better than we were, right? So we've got the strategic plan. We'll be introducing it publicly in September.
Okay.
But this is our roadmap for the next 5 years. And so there are several strategic priorities which focus on academics, focus on technology and enhancing technology. And on the technology side, what you want to do is you want to integrate technology into the work at Fordham Prep, into the classroom. You want to, though, use it to complement and enhance what you already do, not replace it. Right, and so that's a real focus. And Fordham Prep has done, before I got there, Fordham Prep has done a really, really good job at making sure that continues to be the case. So focus on academics, focus on technology, a focus on facilities. We're working on our master plan right now. We have limited space, but we've got terrific architects who are creative geniuses or magicians, or who are giving us some ideas
of ways to redo some of the spaces.
Yeah, ways that we might be able to expand space and actually build and renovate existing spaces. And another strategic priority will be to continue to find ways to enhance that Catholic Jesuit identity. Right, that is the foundation. Everything grows out of that. So you'll see that'll sort of reveal itself in the early fall of this year. We'll do a bit of a launch, if you will, of the strategic plan. So that will be the plan going forward. Look, the bottom line is we want to continue to be a school that attracts really good kids.
Yeah.
Right? Really good kids. Really good kids who are selfless, really good kids who are empathetic, really good kids who have the capacity to be and emerge into men for and with others, like we were talking about. And young men who are going to go out and as Ignatius said, right, as I said earlier, go and set the world on fire. So that's always going to be the goal. It's always going to be about bringing those great kids in, and then those great kids are accompanied by great families.
Well, I just want to say on behalf of myself and a lot of hundreds of thousands of other alumni, keep doing God's work. I really, truly appreciate you coming today and joining us. If a student or anybody wanted to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, just, I think the best thing to do is go to the website, fordhamprep.org, and then navigate to the admissions link. And we've got pros in that admissions office. They are pros, and they will. And the thing you'll get at Fordham Prep is they'll answer the phone.
Yeah, wonderful.
They'll answer the phone. You'll talk to somebody.
Well, thank you so much for joining
Thanks,
us
Steve.
today. Appreciate it.
Thanks.